Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, everybody. Today's date, February 24th, 2021, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week, in this case, the midweek so far, and also try to make sense of it all. Before I do get started, this is a family-friendly podcast, which means that we will try to watch the language somewhat, but sometimes we may show things of a graphic or violent nature, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. Who knew, guys? We're almost through February. We're 4 days away from the end of February, and already this year feels like it's going by, but already feels like 6 months have already passed. Let's start forward with the heavy stuff. There has been news that has came out about a few cases. More importantly, the one I did talk about just yesterday in my Facebook short rant about the jury decision regarding the officers involved in the death of Daniel Prude.
State grand jury deciding not to file charges against 7 Rochester police officers in the death of 41-year-old Daniel Prude last March. The incident seen on police body camera footage obtained and released months later by Prude's family shows him naked, shouting, and being restrained with handcuffs, his head covered with a hood. Officers say he was spitting and saying he had COVID-19. New York's Attorney General Letitia James saying the officers should have been held accountable.
I know that the Prude family will rightfully be disappointed by this outcome, but ultimately we have to respect the decision.
Prude was visiting relatives in Rochester. His brother had called 911 asking for mental health professionals, concerned Prude was having a breakdown. An autopsy provided by the family said he died days later from complications of asphyxia in the setting of a physical restraint.
They could not show no type of respect for a human life.
Tonight, the Attorney General saying the criminal justice system is broken.
The system too often allows officers to use deadly force unnecessarily and without consequence.
Tonight, in a statement, Rochester police calling for calm and respect for the grand jury decision, adding that the 7 officers remain on leave while an internal investigation continues. Ron Allen.
I find it interesting that in this case, it is amazing to me, and I said this before on my Facebook rant yesterday, that honestly, what will it take? I mean, Daniel Prude was a man that his brother called to get him assistance because he was having mental health issues. The officers decided to put a hood on him and then restrain him, put a hood on him, and then put him face down on the ground. I don't know how clear-cut of officer negligence could be constructed. Amazingly enough, the AG, I don't get the DA's explanation. Honestly, you on one hand are sitting there saying, well, the family is definitely not going to be happy about this decision, but we have to respect the rule of law. But on the other end, you say that the justice system is broken and that officers will be entitled to a green light to basically hurt or kill black people. And yet the same police department that these officers are associated with is calling for calm and respect for the grand jury decision. I said it on my rant. I'm going to say it here. I will not be surprised, because I have been saying this, that all the violence comes from looting and things of that nature. That was the example of the output of individuals when you've killed people. I mean, of course, Daniel Prude is one of many other stories we're covering right now. But in that case, that was a clear-cut case of the officers using excessive force, and their actions led to his death. They murdered Daniel Prude. And those 7 officers who are still on leave, and more than likely under protective custody right now, will probably eventually be reinstated or removed to a different area, or probably moved to a different city and state, but still police. It is difficult as a black person to sit there and still say, I'm supposed to trust law enforcement, when law enforcement is basically getting away with everything. I mean, Daniel Prude's just one example, guys. And again, it's like, what more will it take before officers are finally held to the consequences of their actions? Because when an officer is killed, they find the individual, they charge him with the book and throw everything at him and leave no mercy. But whenever an officer is involved in the killing of someone, specifically a minority, how slow the wheels of justice turn, and gives the officer every bit of the benefit of the doubt. All I'm asking is how, and I also sat there and said this too on my podcast, if a law enforcement officer gets hurt in the line of duty, or basically does something to where his actions led to him injured or, God forbid, death, it is hard for me to feel sorry for that officer. Because they expect us to be okay with this because the grand jury, which at this point, we don't know what the grand jury saw or what was seen. We can only assume that the DA had presented all the evidence, but we don't know who's on that jury. And again, speaking of the jury not choosing to not indict these officers, it kind of tells you the mindset of the jury that actually looked at this evidence and said, the officers did everything they could. Again, there's way too many questions on something that's so clear cut that they should have just went ahead and been charged with manslaughter. If not second or third degree murder, manslaughter at the least. And yet these officers are allowed to walk. I don't know why the internal investigation is still ongoing, because the next step is the Daniel Prude family is going to do what other families have done. They've turned around and still sued the department and the officers for wrongful death. It's going to lead to a settlement, and then it's going to be like, okay, well, we're sorry that we killed one of your own, but here's some money to make you go away. Even more so in the case of Ahmaud Arbery.
Lawsuit filed by the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, the young black man who was gunned down while jogging 1 year ago in Georgia. The suit cites 3 men in Arbery's death and alleges a cover-up by local law enforcement. Steve Osinsami has the latest.
This disturbing cell phone video that shows the last few moments of Ahmaud Arbery's life was recorded on the day he died 1 year ago, but it would end up taking more than 2 months before the world got to see it. This morning, the 25-year-old's family says there's a reason why the investigation moved so slowly. In a multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit, they accused their local police and county prosecutors of trying to protect the 3 white men charged in the young man's death. Gregory McMichael, a former police officer, his 34-year-old son Travis, and their friend and neighbor William Rodney Bryan. All 3 are pleading not guilty.
It was a conspiracy to deny Ahmaud and his family justice, and the lawsuit is seeking remedy for that those people will be held accountable.
On GMA 3, the young man's mother says it's a struggle getting through the pain.
I'm trying to think about the good memories that we shared, and that's what basically gets me through the day.
In the lawsuit, the family accuses the Glenn County Police Department of criminal and negligent action, saying that they failed to properly investigate the shooting or arrest the McMichaels and Bryan until months later after the video became public.
Long time coming.
Arbery's family and friends marked the anniversary of his death at his grave Monday night. The 25-year-old was unarmed, and the McMichaels told police they were trying to make a citizen's arrest, thinking he was the person seen in surveillance videos walking through a home that was under construction that was down the street from the home of Travis McMichael. It is still not clear if this was him. And the owners of that home say nothing was taken, and they certainly didn't ask for the neighbors to kill anyone. In their lawsuit, the family underlines the actions of one of the local prosecutors who initially wrote that the shooting was justified, calling their son a, quote, criminal suspect. State investigators who took over the case and quickly issued murder charges are now investigating the same prosecutor and another for their handling of the case. Attorneys for the men charged are sharing statements this morning, one saying that his client acted within the law and another accusing the victim's family and their lawyers of looking for deep pockets. Robin.
Says a lot, doesn't it? And don't get me wrong, Ahmaud Arbery's case is still ongoing. But again, it's amazing that we didn't hear about this. It wasn't reported breaking news until 2 months after the actions of this individual. These individuals killing this young man. And it's amazing even so from the people that murdered him, from the prosecutors, because one of the guys that killed him, keep in mind, was used to be a state prosecutor, was actually a state prosecutor. And was given preference. And then the other person who filmed the whole thing, which was actually the accomplice at the time, who wasn't charged, eventually did get charged. And then everybody from the police to the prosecutor at that time did more to protect the white men than they did to protect Arbery. So again, it's like, I've said it before on my other podcast, and I'll say it again on this one as well. There are two systems of justice in America. And when it comes to minorities, we don't get the same level of justice that the others do. We don't. We are immediately assumed guilty, and if we're lucky enough to be around to tell our story, it never changes. But when a white person gets caught, oh well, they're given the benefit of the doubt. Oh, they're given this. Oh, they're given that. They're not given what they give minorities. So again, law enforcement is going to have a very, very difficult time wondering why minorities don't trust you. And I've said this before. I've said this before to local cops here in Tennessee. I said the reason why you're going to have a hard time is because minorities don't trust you. We don't. We have our own case here where an officer was shooting somebody who ran from them and was unarmed. And again, you expect us to trust you. Protect and serve? Who are you doing that for? Even more so that the lawyers of now the prosecutors who are now in question accuse Ahmaud Arbery's family of just looking for a payday. That's amazing, isn't it? They're accusing them of looking for a payday when that's the only recourse that the family has. You know, when they trusted the system and the system let them down again. And I said before again, what more will it take? What more will it take for an officer to finally be held accountable? Because in the many cases I've seen where officers involved shootings have happened, the last time I checked, only 2 officers actually got tried. Amber Geiger, who basically, you know, the woman who swore up and down a black man broke into her house, which it wasn't, and she shot him, who was unarmed, and she got 10 years. 10 years in prison for taking someone's life when she should have got life in prison. I believe the punishment should fit the crime. You take a life, therefore your life is forfeit. Now, it's amazing in Amber Geiger's case, everybody remembers the defense attorney hugged her, the brother hugged her, the judge hugged her. And it's like you gave sympathy to a law enforcement officer whose action led to the death of an individual that literally did not ask for it nor deserved it. So again, law enforcement, and then you have another individual who got sentenced for 10 years because again, he shot a black man who was running away from him. He wasn't a threat to you, and you still shot him and killed him. You still shot and killed that young man, and that gentleman got 10 years. So out of the many cases that we've seen from law enforcement, I bring this up very much so that only 2 officers have actually seen justice. So forgive me, but I go by the NWA song that is famously known by law enforcement that they hate so much. F the police. That's how I feel. Even more so, like I said before, that's not the only hard story we got because, again, we have information regarding the death of Elijah McCain.
To the independent investigation into the death of Elijah McClain, the young black man who died 3 days after being restrained by Colorado police and injected with a powerful sedative. McClain's family is now speaking out. Stephanie Ramos joined us. And Stephanie, the report says the police had no legal basis to even stop it.
Exactly, Michael. The report also says officers had no reason to believe Elijah McClain was engaged in criminal activity or posed a threat. Elijah would have turned 25 years old this week. His family says at least now they know the truth surrounding his death. This morning, the family of Elijah McClain is reacting to the independent investigative report condemning Aurora, Colorado police officers and paramedics for the death of the unarmed black man.
Just glad because another pair of eyes say the same thing we've been saying for the last year and a half.
The report released Monday states the Aurora police officers did not have the legal basis to stop, frisk, or choke the 23-year-old with autism. Elijah died in August of 2019, 3 days after he was stopped by officers responding to a 911 call about a suspicious person.
Stop! Stop! Stop!
3 officers wrestled him to the ground, put him in a chokehold, and handcuffed him. A medic then injecting him with ketamine, a powerful sedative. The report criticizing Aurora EMS for giving him that shot even though he wasn't resisting. Quote, giving the 140-pound McClain a grossly inaccurate amount of the sedative, enough for a 190-pound man.
So what we see is a young man who did everything right, and he was murdered by these police and medics because of his race.
McClain suffered cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital, where he died 3 days later. Elijah's family still heartbroken.
Elijah McClain Mosley was loved. He's missed. Hope we get justice for him. So we miss him every day.
The Aurora Police Department has not commented on this report, which was paid for by the city council. The family has now filed a lawsuit against the city.
And again, that, and of course, for Elijah McClain, they actually did file an independent report because the first examiner sat there and said that he died. He didn't die of injuries to the officers. They said that he died of his own health issues. Which, it's amazing to me that the state had to go get an independent autopsy done, which found out that all of this mess happened. And again, of course, that case is still ongoing. That the officers and the first responders at the time are all responsible for leading to this man's death. It's clear cut. It's clear cut. And I just keep on saying, what more will it take? And like I said, suing for wrongful death is the only other option that minority families have because these officers don't get punished. These officers seem to get to walk away. And like I said, sometimes they serve in the same city. Sometimes they get reassigned to a different city and state because they're going to be somewhere where nobody knows them. And I don't agree with Tupac much. But I will say the one thing he said was true. That the biggest gang in America is the police. And like any gang, just trust me, it's always funny when I hear some law enforcement officer say, oh, I like your show, but I don't like what you said about cops. Well, we don't like the fact that you're silent about bad cops. And I say this to every law enforcement officer. So I say this to every one of them. You want public support? Call out the bad cops. You call out the bad cops, you will be amazed how quickly we will back you up. But if you don't call it but every time a good cop calls out a bad cop, the good cops get released, get reassigned, get fired, but the bad cops get rewarded. And yet you wonder why we can't trust them. And yet you wonder why so many families are wanting justice, but you can't get justice when the police basically have every card in the deck and they run the house. Even more so, this other story I have that's also on Fox about what this officer did to a person that was just getting him out of a squad car.
Greenville County man speaking out about this body camera footage from his arrest in 2019. Stefan Hopkins says he filed a complaint with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office after he says a deputy slammed his head in a car door. But the sheriff's office says that's not what happened. Only on Fox, we talked to the sheriff's office, Hopkins, and a community activist to get both sides of the story.
Fox Carolina's Brooklyn Cromer is live outside the Law Enforcement Center in downtown Greenville. Brooklyn, this video has gone viral since being posted online. So walk us through what happened in this video.
Well, Cody, this video shows a deputy pulling Hopkins out of the back of his patrol car. And as Hopkins lands on the ground, a struggle takes place. Now, during this incident, you can see a car door close on Hopkins' head. He says it was excessive force, but the sheriff's office doesn't agree.
All right, I'm at your car. Oh, Lord, yeah, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm on camera.
A Greenville County deputy's body cam captured this footage of Stephon Hopkins being pulled out of the back of a patrol car in April 2019.
Yeah, I was just scared, like I really thought the officers was going to kill me. But then I really punched my face with handcuffs, and I was just terrified.
Prior to taking Hopkins into custody, deputies responded to a call for a domestic issue. The sheriff's office says Hopkins refused verbal commands and tried to run. According to deputies, they used a taser, but it had no effect. In the body cam video, Hopkins alleges he was hit in the face by the deputy with a pair of handcuffs during the arrest. The sheriff's office says the deputy struck Hopkins once in the face after Hopkins wrapped his arms around the deputy's waist. After arriving at the detention center, the deputy says Hopkins refused to stand up and rolled out of the car. Hopkins says the door was slammed on his head, but the deputy wrote in a report, quote, "I went to close the door and he rolled and put his head in the way of the door, not causing any injury."
Hey, this man just put my head in the door and slammed.
We got a lively one.
I'll do it again if you don't stop.
The sheriff's office says they've looked into the incident and found the use of force administered was not unnecessary, and it's in their determination that the unfortunate circumstance involving Mr. Hopkins' complaint was not intentional. Community activist Bruce Wilson says this never should have happened.
Well, and that makes no sense. That absolutely makes no sense for them to say that that's justified. This man was handcuffed. He was handcuffed. And so you're saying that we're not going to investigate it, even if he files what you call an official complaint? You've already told him what you're going to do. You're going to say that the officer was justified in slamming a door on a handcuffed man's head, and that's okay.
Well, Hopkins has made a written complaint, but the sheriff's office says he needs to come forward to file a formal complaint so they can conduct a thorough investigation. Now, I should also mention we have that full 6-minute body cam clip on our Fox Carolina News app.
They're sitting there saying that he should have filed a written, an official complaint so they can investigate it. Okay, so it's amazing. This is why I sit there and say, even with body cam footage, it's like they still take the officer's word. Now, look, the man got arrested. Okay, cool. You pulled him out. You pulled him out of an office. You pulled him out of a squad car while he was restrained. And no offense from the look of the video, from the body cam, from your view, you can't sit there and say the man rolled into the way of the car door when his arms are tied behind his back and you're pulling him out by his legs. You cannot sit there and say that he just happened to conveniently roll into the way of the door as you closed it. Because why in the world would you close a door with an individual that's not on his feet and not clearly out of the way of the door? Even more so that you sit there and blame him for his own head being crushed by a car door that you closed. And then it's amazing that you hear on the other side of it. Officer, he tells the other officer who comes out there, officer, this man just closed, he just closed the door on my head. And you hear him say, you clearly hear it say, yep, and if you don't do what I told you to do, I'm going to do it again. So you acknowledge the simple fact. So by that admission, you admit that you closed the door on this man's head while sitting there saying, oh, well, it's his fault. And again, it's amazing that this comes from the same office saying, we reviewed his complaint and saw that the additional use of force was not unnecessary. So let me get this straight. You can close a car door onto somebody's head, and it's fine. But it's amazing how they try to say, well, it's really his fault because he rolled into it. No, he didn't. You closed the door on his head, and now he's saying it's on camera, and it's amazing how I keep saying they want us to see this on camera. We are literally seeing it recorded, and it's obvious the actions of law enforcement are getting to the point to where they can do whatever they want, and it's allowed. So again, that's why I sit there and say to all law enforcement who watch this video, because I know a few of you do, you wonder why it's so hard for minorities to trust you and come to you? Exhibit A. Your fellow brethren will use us as doorknobs and get away with it. Your brethren will put hoods on us and put us down the ground to where we can't breathe. You will get EMS to give us horse tranquilizers to calm us when there's no reason to. And yet you wonder why we don't trust you. So, again, frack the police. Moving right along, guys, like I said before, you're probably wondering if you know, the U.S. Postal Service is a time-honored tradition. And you're probably wondering if you're expecting like your tax refund in the mail because you may not like direct deposit. You actually might like the mail as it comes in. Well, Postmaster DeJoy, which I'm still surprised this guy is still here, is apologizing for slow mail. Now, for all those that don't remember, he was actually appointed to Trump because he basically paid Trump at a fundraiser, and Trump basically recommended him for the job, which he was definitely unqualified for. But keep in mind, the reason why I keep bringing this man up is because right now he is still in office. He is actually one of the very few Trump appointees that are still in office under a new administration. I am still surprised Biden has not yet fired him. But because of the things that Postmaster DeJoy has done, he has actually cut down overtime hours. He has actually tried to stop them from using auto selection machines to actually speed up processing of mail. He's basically slowed down mail, which his main opposition was to basically be effective during the last election for all those that were voting by mail. He was trying to slow down mail to actually stop certain votes from coming in. And yet, this man still somehow has a job. Now, I was looking into this as he's explained that they're trying to turn around and change what's happened because of COVID and the winter weather in some areas. But the thing I want to point out about this is he's still hired. And I'm asking how. Biden does have the ability to fire him. But this is why I say we're Democrats. I just don't get it, because you do need to remove all the stains that Trump has left at the White House and at the administration. And having someone who is unqualified to be Postmaster General is one of those things. He just simply needs to be removed because mail affects everybody, especially for those in rural areas. They get their prescriptions by mail. For those that actually get their checks by mail. For those that depend on, like I said, life-saving and medication equipment, they all fall in that same category. And this man is putting a lot of those individuals at risk. It is finally time to get rid of one of the last remaining Trump appointees. But speaking of that, also what happened on Capitol Hill was a couple of things. They actually did have a commission to look into the Senate hearing on the U.S. Capitol attack, and this is what they've done for day one so far.
Provide you a quick overview of why I think it was a coordinated attack. One, these people came specifically with equipment. You're bringing climbing gear to a demonstration. You're bringing explosives. You're bringing chemical spray, such as what Captain Mendoza had talked about. You're coming prepared. The fact that the group that attacked our West Front approximately 20 minutes before the event over at the Ellipse ended, which means they were planning on our agency not being at what they call full strength, watching the other event, saying, hey, that event's ending. Okay, everybody get on post. They're going to be marching our way, knowing that we may not be at full strength at that time. And then also the fact that we were dealing with 2 pipe bombs that were specifically, set right off the edge of our perimeter to, what I suspect, draw resources away. I think there was a significant coordination with this attack.
Let's talk now with CNN's Whitney Wild. She's been tracking this for us. What were the biggest revelations that you heard so far today?
Well, there were so many. There was a lot of news that came out of this. I think the most important thing, though, was this confusion about the intelligence. Basically, what all three men had said, I'm talking about Paul Irving, Michael Stanger, and Stephen Sund, was that the intelligence said that there was always a possibility that something bad would happen, but the possibility wasn't probable, which in hindsight was in almost unbelievably thin line. I mean, so thin you could hardly see it. And what's really striking about that assessment is that these are men with decades-long law enforcement experience. Paul Irving left the Secret Service as the assistant director, and even still, most of the response we heard from these three men was, well, the intelligence didn't tell us that there was going to be a battle. They looked at the intelligence and didn't make the assessment that turned out to be true. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that we learned today that former USCP Chief Stephen Sund heard about this very critical FBI memo that warned of a war on the Capitol yesterday. He heard about it yesterday. I cannot stress enough how unbelievable that timeline is. What he said was that memo came from one of the local FBI field divisions. It went to members of his intelligence unit and never made it to him, which raises the question of what would he have done with that piece of intelligence. So there's this preparation and then there's the response. And then the last, I think, revelation about the preparation was this confusion about what the conversation was about bringing in the National Guard ahead of time. Stephen Sund claims that in the days before the riot, he went to Paul Irving, he went to Michael Stanger, basically his two bosses on the Capitol Police Board, to say, we need an emergency declaration. We need to call in the National Guard. However, Paul Irving says he didn't hear the conversation the same way. He thought this was a casual conversation with him and Stephen Sund, in which Sund was saying, if we need extra people, the National Guard's offering 125 troops. What do you think? And Paul Irving in the end said, look, I just don't think the intelligence supports this. And he says they all walked away saying that their plan was very solid. So those are, I think, the biggest revelations about how the planning breakdown happened.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there just because I wanted to... Well, sorry. I was hoping to get rid of that screen, but I'll read it for you guys because I know it's going to be a little hard to see. Because, yes, it's a hearing because they want to get to the bottom of the U.S. Capitol attack. We all know it was all Trump people and Proud Boys. But this is what it was. It was planned and coordinated, and white supremacists were involved. We knew from our FBI report from years ago that white supremacy has infiltrated all levels of government and law enforcement. Accusations of bad intel that didn't indicate an insurrection. When you had all the intel that you knew an attack was going to happen, especially from the FBI who had warned U.S. Capitol Police that yes, an attack was imminent. Of course, Capitol Police lacked training and equipment because, as you can see, they weren't actually given the same riot gear that they would use for black folks. Structural issues with the Capitol Hill Police Board. They did not treat them the same way they treated black people. And finally, the coup de grace of it all, the National Guard request wasn't immediately approved. And you guys have sat there and heard me sit there and say that the Pentagon had actually went to the chief of police for the U.S. Capitol and sat there and said, hey, something's going down. Do you need National Guard assistance? Oh, no, we're fine. And they kept on saying it, and lo and behold, they needed it. And it wasn't even the police chief. It wasn't the chief of police that requested it. It was actually Vice President Pence at the time that requested that assistance. So again, that tells you a lot. Even more so, like I said, even though it's a hearing, it may not get anywhere. It does go into the next thing about the disparity in police responses, because we all ask this question, and I get that too, Kelly, for them to bullshit around and then say we're justified. Yeah, you're exactly right. But the next clip I have pretty much says the disparity of all the things we were saying back on January 6th about the Capitol Hill insurrection, where all the white terrorists and supremacists decided to try to take the Capitol and try to take hostages. We all said the same thing. Would the police response been the same if they were black?
We want justice! When do we want it? Now!
Black history in the United States and protests go hand in hand, and people of color have had to continually advocate for equal rights.
Police are advancing again.
The last year has brought this ongoing struggle to the forefront, but it's also shed light on the stark contrast between two Americas, where a peaceful black protest was met with violent police clashes, but a deadly insurrection left officers overrun.
What we see is that Black folks simply, and people of color simply, don't have the latitude to act out publicly, whether it's righteous or not, in ways that whiteness is always allowed to act out publicly. When you see the level of force that was erected in response to Black Lives Matter over the summer in DC, those protesters would have never even gotten close to the Capitol to the way that we saw those white protesters on January 6th.
That disparity in police presence at the Capitol has led many to ask, would the response have been different if the protesters were Black?
There's always been a sense that Black folks were asking for more than they deserved, and that they were willing to engage that by taking on forms of violence. What Black Lives Matter is a direct extension of what we saw with the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s and nonviolent protests even before then.
It also ties into, I would say, a much longer history that creates expectations that we're still trying to unpack or still trying to dismantle in 2020, 2021. And those are expectations that Black people are dangerous and violent. And law enforcement, unfortunately, in too many cases, carries that mythology. In contrast, the thinking on January 6th that white people are the power brokers in society may create a very different and more hands-off police response.
In the days leading up to Donald Trump's Save America rally, there were warning signs of the violence to come.
They're not taking this White House. We're going to fight like hell, I'll tell you right now.
The Capitol Police, and they basically have said this, that they did have intelligence about that this could be an unruly crowd.
If you're going to be the zero and not the hero, we're coming for you.
The police chief, this is his own words, went to the sergeant at arms and said, I think we might really need the National Guard. And they waved him off and apparently told him they didn't like the optics of having the military there.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go.
In contrast with other events in DC last year, additional state and federal law enforcement agencies were not pre-staged ahead of the riot. And as the crowd pushed past barricades and made their way up the Capitol steps, police were quickly overwhelmed.
For whatever reason, a decision was made to basically, in my view, set up the Capitol Police to fail. And that's exactly what happened. You have low barricades that hook together. You can virtually step over them. You only really have the Capitol Police. You don't have the National Guard. Nobody's in riot gear. You're too close to the building. I mean, it sort of goes on and on and on.
I've never been in this house. How about you?
Although many were later arrested on federal charges, on the day of the insurrection, only 61 people were arrested. DC police arrested more than 5 times as many people at the June 1st Black Lives Matter protest. The event that took place at the Capitol shined a light on what's seen as a double standard in police response between Black and white protesters.
To see the police response against Black Lives Matter protesters over the late spring and summer with a very different response on January 6th was quite striking. And certainly one of the explanations for that was the different racial composition of the crowds at those two protests and the different particular aims and grievances of those crowds.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
Following the death of George Floyd in May 2020, demonstrators held protests across the country. In response, at least 40 cities imposed curfews, and National Guard members were activated in 15 states and Washington, D.C.
The Black Lives Matter protests were overwhelmingly peaceful. If we look at the statistics, very few injuries, very few protests had property damage, even though that was what was often highlighted in the media.
It's not surprising that even when we see nonviolent protests, as we did throughout the summer of 2020, and I'm thinking explicitly about the protests in Washington, D.C., in which we suddenly see flyovers, right? And we see a response to it that is not in line with what the threat actually is on the ground.
In June 2020, police used overwhelming force against Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C.
You have this spontaneous event where the president decides that he wants to hold a photo op in front of a church. And so he gets this reinforcement of people in riot gear to literally move this peaceful crowd by and large with pepper spray, etc. So total overreaction to what was going on. The event at Black Lives Matter and the event at the Capitol were both colossal failures for law enforcement.
Throughout history, there have been dozens of peaceful black protests met with a disproportionate police response.
You know, when we talk about the genius of Martin Luther King beyond his oratory, but strategically understanding that nonviolent protests that was going to be broadcast around the world would bring attention to the fact that these folks were protesting nonviolently, but yet they were treated in very violent ways.
We feel that we have to do it this way in order to bring the evil out into the open, so that this community will be forced to deal with it.
If there is one element of contemporary protest that changed the game, it is no question that it's handheld devices. Beginning with the Rodney King case back in 1991, where a white man who was in an apartment innocently pulled out his video camera and captured what was happening to Rodney King on tape, it was a game changer.
Over the last decade, incidents of police abuse captured on camera have skyrocketed.
Take a knee! Take a knee!
The way that the Black Lives Matter generation has been able to weld social protests in the streets, nonviolent, along with social media, has allowed them to pay attention to some of the disconnections between their protests and what's actually how they're being perceived by some white Americans.
We ain't hurt not one cop, but you want to look at me like I'm your enemy.
Videos of the 2014 Black Lives Matter protests in Ferguson, Missouri went viral and brought intense scrutiny to police violence.
The Ferguson piece was really important because you got to see on the ground the way that protesters were being tear gassed, right? The way that they could respond immediately to what was happening to them, right? We didn't have to watch newsreel footage as we did during the civil rights movement.
Just as the police response in Ferguson illuminated an issue in policing, so did the discrepancy in law enforcement's response in Washington, D.C.
The riots on January 6th were a sort of crowning moment on a number of events that were all pointing in the same direction. Here is another reminder that battle over how we understand who's entitled in our society and whether certain groups should be privileged over others is an ongoing dispute.
For many white Americans, it was as if they had just found out that white supremacy existed, that white supremacy is also intimately connected to law enforcement and even our military forces. You know, this is something that folks who've been fighting against white supremacy and dealing with anti-racist politics have long understood.
What happened on January 6th and the contrast with how the protesters were treated this past summer when it was Black Lives Matter. I'm hopeful that for some people that is a moment when their eyes open up. Potentially for people, it shakes their complacency and shakes their willingness to overlook what to them might have in the past been more subtle signs of the racism that's baked into U.S. history.
Now let's think about that for a second, y'all. That was literally the best example of what we saw when it comes to law enforcement and when they handle protests done by minorities and when white people can just do whatever they want. And you saw the discrepancy in law enforcement, which again, guys, I know you're watching this. Some of y'all like to watch my podcast, and I thank you. But again, do you see this? This is what we're pointing out. It's just amazing that whenever it comes to minorities in protests, we get riot gear. And the Capitol riot, which those white supremacists and terrorists did you see one person, did you see one cop in riot gear? I don't think you did. But they allowed them to come straight into the Capitol, even as so much as to go into the Senate chamber or even to go into Senate offices and cause destruction. But again, it is amazing to me how in the world that a lot of people, and like the guy said, a lot of people, realized at that moment that white supremacy exists. Still, every minority person was like, welcome to the party. We've been knowing that. We've been knowing white supremacy has never went away, but thanks for joining the rest of us. So again, this is why I say law enforcement is going to have a very difficult time trying to convince us that you're here to help us, you're going to have a hard time. I mean, I'm one of those people that still believes there's no such thing as a good cop, because every good cop seems to get fired. Every bad cop seems to get a promotion. I mean, until that proves me wrong, that's just the mindset I have on it. It might be different for those that are watching this, but for me, it's just, like I said, you're going to be having a hard time trying to convince people. But speaking of people that are kind of mad, Trump's mad at the Supreme Court because, like I said before in my previous podcast on Saturday as well as the week before, Trump had asked the Supreme Court to block Trump had asked the Supreme Court to block certain prosecutors and DAs from getting his tax returns. The Supreme Court said, no, you're a private citizen now, and you're no longer the president, and Trump had some choice words for the Supreme Court.
Has come now from Donald Trump about this. So this is just in. I want to read this. I'm going to read this in part. There's the top of it just reads like a Twitter rant, so I'm going to kind of get to about a paragraph into it. It says, so now, for more than 2 years, New York City has been looking at almost every transaction I've ever done, including seeking tax returns, which were done by among the biggest and most prestigious law and accounting firms in the U.S. The Tea Party was treated far better by the IRS than Donald Trump. The Supreme Court never should have let this fishing expedition happen, but they did. This is something which has never happened to a president before. It is all Democrat-inspired in a totally Democrat location, New York City and state, completely controlled and dominated by a heavily reported enemy of mine, Governor Andrew Cuomo. These are attacks by Democrats willing to do anything to stop the almost 75 million people, the most votes by far ever gotten by a sitting president, who voted for me in the election, an election which many people and experts feel that I won. I agree. Just a fact check there. That's not true. Going on here, the new phenomenon of headhunting prosecutors and AGs who try to take down their political opponents using the law as a weapon is a threat to the very foundation of our liberty. That's what is done in third world countries. Even worse are those who run for prosecutorial or attorney general offices in far left states and jurisdictions, pledging to take out a political opponent. That's fascism, not justice, and that is exactly what they are trying to do with respect to me, except that the people of our country won't stand for it. In the meantime, Trump says here, murders and violent crime are up in New York City by record numbers and nothing is done about it. Our elected officials don't care. All they focus on is the persecution of President Donald J. Trump. I will fight on, just as I have for the last 5 years, even before I was successfully elected, that part in parentheses. Despite all of the election crimes that were committed against me, we will win.
Interesting, isn't it? That and I said, you know the beauty part about all this? The one bright light, I say bright light. Keep in mind, Trump can't tweet. He's banned from Facebook. He's banned from Twitter. He's banned from Instagram. He's banned from almost every social media platform out there. He is banned indefinitely. Sure, it's late as all get out. Should have actually happened 4 years ago. But still, he's banned. And, no more crazy tweets. No more anything else. He now has to go through his people now in Florida to basically give out statements. And I, for one, enjoy it. I mean, of course, it's still a fact that quote, the statement that the CNN reporter has read was definitely had more holes than Swiss cheese. But again, let's look at the significance of this, guys. The significance of this is that Trump no longer has the juice. That, yes, the Supreme Court has decided that, no, we're going to basically decline your request to block anything. And New York prosecutors and everyone else, they'll still have to do some legal hurdles. Don't get me wrong, because of course, if there's anything that Donald Trump knows very well, it's the court system, and he knows his lawyers can try to get an appeal to the lower courts, which at this point, it's more than unlikely they may accept it, because if they did, then that means it would have to get looked over again. And of course, this has been going on honestly since the second year of his first and hopefully only term as president. So what does that mean in the long run? That means in the long run that eventually his tax returns are going to be released. And I have been saying this from Jump Street. A man who fights this hard to make sure his tax returns are never released seems to have something to hide. I call it the Bernie Madoff theory. Because if you're worried about your tax returns being put out there for the world to see, then that tells me you are definitely hiding something. And I said, now I also say it like this. This is why I say I'm not worried about 2024. I'm not worried about 2024 because I'm hoping that Biden and Madam Vice President Kamala Harris will be able to do some great things. There are some things that Biden is doing right now that some are good, some of them are questionable, but they're definitely not Trump. Especially in this sense, like I'm saying for simple fact of the matter, I think Trump might actually wind up being in jail. Or, as I've said before, the Simpsons haven't been wrong yet. So speaking of Biden, like I said, he did announce changes to the Paycheck Protection Program. And like I said, you might agree with Biden on some things. This is one thing I definitely kind of disagree with.
Beginning of this pandemic, 400,000 small businesses have closed. 400,000. And millions more are hanging by a thread. Today, I'm announcing additional changes to the PPP program that will make sure we look out for the mom and pop businesses even more than we already have. The Paycheck Protection Program is a bipartisan effort. Democrats and Republicans helped pass it. But Democrats and Republicans have also voiced concerns about improving it. With their input, that's what we're doing in our administration, improving it. In the last month, we've increased the share of funding for small businesses with fewer than 10 employees by nearly 60%. For businesses in rural communities, the share of funding is up nearly 30% since we came to office. It's my hope, that as Democrats and Republicans who have backed the PPP program, that Democrats and Republicans will back the American Rescue Plan. The vast majority of the American people, more than 70% of the American people, including a majority of Republicans, want us to act based on all the polling data, act big and act quickly. They understand we're not going to get our economy back in shape and the millions of people back to work until we beat this virus. Getting our economy back means bringing our small businesses back.
Now, I've been saying this about the Paycheck Protection Program since Trump had enacted this, along with Steve Mnuchin, who was the former head of the Treasury. I have said that the PPP program was probably the worst program ever put together because the idea of this program was to help small businesses. Because, Republicans love saying small business while giving billions and trillions out to their rich friends and corporations. Hence hypocrisy. But the protection program itself didn't really help small businesses. It actually helped corporations. Ruth Chris got a paycheck protection. Ruth Chris got a loan. Burger Shack, or I forgot how they call it, that got a loan. Kanye West's clothing line got a loan. Joel Osteen and his quote-unquote ministry. I always love how certain ministries and churches, especially the Catholic Church, also got loans. And again, keep in mind, these are multi-million and I can say billion as well, billion-dollar corporations with plenty of assets and could definitely leverage their capital through other loans and means and apply for the loan and got it. There's even one story out there right now with a lady that got a PPP loan and she used it for a shopping spree. But the small businesses that are truly affected by this never got those loans. Now, of course, now with Biden saying, well, businesses that have 10 people or less can now apply for it. I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of time because the problem with the Paycheck Protection Program that stupid program, because it's got way too many alliteration for peace. The problem with that is if you really want to help people, Bernie had the right idea from Jump Street. When Bernie said give every American $2,000 a month until the pandemic is over, when he sat there and said that, everyone was saying it can't be done. But the same amount that the Paycheck Protection Program program is operating on, that very same amount of money you could have gave to every American. But we're still on the small business thing, which again goes back to this. I have said it best. The way that you can actually save the U.S. economy is based, because of the capitalist system we're based upon, you have to give those who earn lower more money, because the more money they have, the more op they're able to spend. We've seen that happen with stimulus plans. You're going to see it with tax refunds. A lot of people are starting to get their tax refunds back. And when they get the tax refunds, some may save it, some may pay bills, but others will go out there and go buy stuff that they've been having their eye on. So when you give the middle and lower classes money, they spend. When they spend, the economy flourishes. But you know what else will make the economy flourish? When you reverse, when the rich are having a higher tax rate and the corporations have a higher tax rate, and you are giving tax breaks to the middle and lower classes, the economy thrives. Google it. I wish I had the Google in front of me. That actually, I need to get that graph the next time for my Saturday podcast. But I'll show the graph because I love numbers, and numbers don't certainly lie. But I don't think that this Paycheck Protection Program is going to help small businesses, because so far it's helped people like Kanye, and after that divorce, he's definitely going to need it. That's why I say that's the one. Like I said, I'm not going to agree with everything Biden is doing, but I just wish that he got rid of that and replaced it with Bernie's plan. Because the American Rescue Plan, of course, everybody's hyping at $1,400, but we need consistency. We don't need a paycheck. We don't need a handout once every 3 months, because Republicans will sit there and say the price tag is too high, which is amazing that Republicans are going to talk about a price tag when they've spent more than Democrats in the last 4 years. That's all I'm saying. But move right along, because I got a couple of crazy stories before we get to the end of our feel-good story. This one is still amazing to me. OnlyFans model says Catholic school expelled her children over her racy photos. A California mother of 3 said her boys were expelled from a Catholic school after administrators discovered that she had an OnlyFans account. I wish I could make this up. They sat there and said, quote unquote, your apparent quest for high profile controversy in support of your adult website is in direct conflict with what we hope to impart to our students and is directly opposed to the policies laid out in our parent-student handbook. We therefore require that you find another school for your children and have no further association with us. Okay, so let me get this straight. So the Catholic school kicked out her kids because she has an OnlyFans page, and sat there and said, well, this is the stuff that we don't impart to our children. Really? The Catholic Church? Historically, you guys don't have a squeaky clean history. You know that, right? Especially with certain priests, a certain grabby priest, and the fact that they get whisked away to the Vatican. Just saying, you can't really judge. If you throw them, ye if not without sin, cast the first stone. But again, it's one of those things, like I said before, it's crazy as far as how schools and things of that nature go, and parents are trying to get their kids back in school, and you have schools out there who are extremists all get out, especially since the fact that it's the mother. And I'm not gonna knock OnlyFans. If you have a successful OnlyFans, then make your money, boo-boo. I'm not gonna knock you for it. And you're right, Kelly, so how did they know? I think that one of those people in that Catholic school board was a fan. I'm going to be honest. I think somebody on that Catholic school board found out and they liked what they saw and they're like, oh no. Or they got found out. One of the two. But it's crazy. It's like, how in the world are you more worried about a parent's extracurricular activities when you should be worried about the children's education? And speaking of children's education, I understand teachers. I love educators. You guys, yep, you're right. Obviously, somebody was watching. You're exactly right. But going back to the next story, guys, I understand teachers. Teachers, you guys have it rough. You are in a profession that you don't get paid enough for. You're overworked. You're underpaid. You're in overcrowded classrooms, and you actually might be forced to go back in and teach because some parents are tired, are learning that teaching their children while being remote is a difficult job. However, you also want to make sure you're not being recorded when you're being yourself.
Tonight, frustrations over reopening schools deepening in California, triggering protests among parents and even fueling comments made by school board members caught on a hot mic.
Are we alone?
Yeah.
If you're going to call me out, I'm going to up.
For several minutes, a board of trustees with the Oakley Union Elementary School Board could be heard criticizing parents.
It's really unfortunate that they want to pick on us because they want their babysitters back.
The discussion abruptly cuts off when the group realizes they had a live audience.
Oh, we have the meeting open to the public right now.
A viewer recorded the meeting and uploaded it to YouTube, sparking swift backlash among parents who demanded the members involved step down.
It is shocking to our community, and it really damaged the trust that we thought we had with our board.
The board president was the first to resign, calling her comments callous and uncalled for. And overnight, the rest followed suit, issuing an apology, writing in part, "We realize it is our responsibility to model the conduct that we expect of our students and staff, and it is our obligation to build confidence in district leadership. Our comments failed you in both regards." The school reopening struggles span the country. Last month, Dr. Anthony Fauci
Okay, so I want to cut off right there because it goes into another story. Okay, like I said, educators, I get it. I really, truly get it. You guys need to blow off some steam, as you should. But how is it? I'm going to be honest. How is it that no one checked to make sure that the Zoom meeting wasn't still to the public? That's the part that I want to ask questions about. Because trust me, if you see my Facebook post, and I talk about my job on there too. But I do it publicly knowing that, of course, yeah, I'll have to answer for it. That's fine. But again, educators, I get that you get stressed out. You know, parents don't really give you guys the benefit of what, you know, you should be getting. And I love the fact she sat there and said they just want their babysitters back. And I'm like, I understand her frustration. She's not wrong. A lot of parents really do not give educators the best opinion or observation, because a lot of them do see them as babysitters. They sit there and say, "Well, you're going to raise my kid for 8 hours, for 7 hours, and then you're going to send them back." Now, again, there's one mistake in all this, because you don't think teachers don't have meetings like this where they let off steam. Of course they do. It's just the fact that these people did not seem to check to see if their meeting was still public before they decided to rant. But does it require them resigning? I mean, you can argue that. I mean, is this how they feel? Could you blame them? Like I said before, these are teachers that are stressed. These are teachers that are worried about catching COVID. These are teachers worried about trying to actually do their jobs. They're just as stressed out as the parents are, because there are some parents out there that realize that teaching is not as easy as they think it is. Now, do I think that their only mistake was that their meeting was laid bare to the public? Yeah, that's their only mistake. I mean, you can say how you feel, but again, to the point to where it's public, that's where it comes to bite you in the butt. And in this case, it definitely did bite them in the butt. The last story I got, guys, like I said, for all those that are wondering about the America Rescue Plan that Biden has, well, it has finally got to the House, which right now the $1.9 trillion plan is expected to be voted into the House today, which actually, if done by today, should mean that by Friday, it should be headed to the Senate. Now, again, for all those that don't remember about this plan does include, for now, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025, which is 4 years from now. This bill also included the $1,400 direct payments to Americans making under $75,000. So as right now, it is possible that the actual bill itself could hit Biden's desk sometime in March, which tells us that if it does hit in March and he does sign it, then actual $14 paychecks could go out between mid-March, probably into April. So unless Democrats, again, this is the one thing I'll say about Democrats before we move on to our feel-good story. Democrats, for the simple fact of the matter, you guys have a slim majority, especially especially Senator Manchin in West Virginia, who acts more Republican than Democrat. Democrats, you can do the one thing Republicans have been able to do every time they have a majority. They are able to get everybody in line and vote for the bills they want. That's the reason why Mitch McConnell loved being the Senate Majority Leader. It's the reason why you had very few Republicans go against the party. Whatever bills they wanted to push through, whatever Senate, Supreme Court justice picks, because keep in mind, that's how Kavanaugh and Barrett got in, because the Republicans ramrodded them in. And now, Democrats, it's your turn. You have the House. You have a slim majority in the Senate, with Madam Vice President Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. If there was any time to ram bills through that you want to get done, because we are not that far off from midterms, which again could put the whole entire majority in jeopardy, now would be the time to get bills through and get these people what they want in order to ensure that you keep a majority in the House. You definitely know for the time being that you will have Joe Biden as president for the next couple of years. The point being is that now is the time to actually come together as a party and quit the disparity, because again, you got voted on the fact that you were going to get things done, and we are still waiting for actions. Balls in your court, ladies and gentlemen. But aside from that, guys, like I said, we'll go into our feel-good story. Like I said, usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we sometimes cover stories that are about doom and gloom, and sometimes they're just really ugly. But we do try to put a little light on the situation, as tomorrow is Friday Eve. It'll be Thursday. And I just want to bring up this story because, like I said, this actually happened, of course, during the winter weather, where this restaurant owner was using his own advertising money to promote his competitors. What he actually did, this Tex-Mex owner actually decided to use gift cards to raffle off to his customers in order to get those to go to other establishments around to basically stimulate the economy in his town. So pretty much he was doing sort of a paying it forward, using his own money that he set aside for promotions and commercials that he was helping other restaurants in his area, that's actually the gentleman right there, to basically keep businesses open. I thought it was a great idea because when you shop local and you help out other local stores, in the end they all win. So I love the fact that what that man did, and just really above all else, kept many doors open and many people employed. So besides that, guys, like I said, that's really all that we have for this podcast for the midweek edition. Before I do get out of here, I do got to do some shameless plugging. All of my shows actually are now in one spot for Facebook and YouTube. The link right at the bottom, if you copy and paste that into your browser, will take you to my links, which are the podcast shows on Facebook and on YouTube. Of course, my scheduling has changed a little bit, just to give you guys an idea of what I'll be doing so far. So, of course, every Wednesday from 8 to 10 will be the midweek edition of How the Frack We Got Here, currently watching now. Of course, the weekend edition will still be every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. And also on Friday nights from 8 to 10 is Get Bit, which is my Blurred podcast, which covers video games, anime, superhero television, movies, and things of that nature. I will actually have a good friend of mine, Shadow, with me Friday night, who also is a content creator and also an avid Blurred like myself. So so definitely tune in Friday night at 8 p.m. for that. And of course, later on Saturday nights from 8 to 10 will be another episode of the Off Limits podcast. It is the podcast that definitely does go there. And by go there, I mean we talk about anything and everything. We talked about last Saturday how 2021 was going to be the year of clout chasing, and the examples of that was Gorilla Glue Girl, for just examples. So all of my shows can definitely be found, like I said, at the link at the bottom. Just copy and paste that there. And your boy does travel as well. And I did want to point this out because a lot of people have been asking me about Uncle Obi's adventures and more. I do travel, guys. So if you do need a book, to whether you need to get down the street or another state or across the country, to do a cruise, or just to go to see the other side of the world, definitely let me actually help you, because I will definitely bust my tail to get you the dream adventure that you want at a price you can afford. I guarantee, as like I said before, I will do more than just Travelocity and everybody else can do for you. I do it with a smile at the same time. Who else doesn't want to save a little money? So like I say about Uncle Obi's Adventures and More on Facebook, we just don't sell travel, we sell great memories. And yes, I do actually have a $100 referral, which means that if you know somebody that needs travel, or you need travel yourself, or know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that needs travel, definitely send them my way. And if they book anything with me, it's $100 in your pocket. And there's no limit on how many referrals you can do. So if you know 100 people that like to travel and you send them to me and all 100 people book with me, then you're going to have a very nice little payday before Christmas. So keep that in mind about Uncle Obi's Travels, Adventures, and More for all your travel needs. And of course, I want to shout out my buddy Vaughn, who's also watching this podcast right now, who will be returning with his podcast very soon, Big BZ on Facebook. If you are his friend, you can definitely go to his video section. If not, be his friend. He's friendly sometimes. But once you're in his video section, you'll be able to see the podcast that he's done so far. I'm just going to give a brief overlook for the podcast themselves. The VST Intercast is a news podcast. That news could be movies, music, or video games, or trailers that loves to show. I call him the king of weird trailers, just because he finds the ones that sometimes are great, and then he finds ones that are just questionable, and then I question his taste. But it's always interactive and it's always fun. Definitely check that out. He also has another show for the Purposes podcast called RAF. What is RAF? Think of RAF like America's Funniest Home Videos if it was launched from WorldStar. They're all meant to be funny as a way, because he usually used to do this at the beginning of the week just to reset the weeks, to have you laugh and chuckle and try to just, laugh away the stress of the day. But definitely, it is definitely not a bring your kids moment. It is definitely adult. So definitely check out RAF when you get a chance. Also, his other show, which I'm looking forward to, is the Rhythmist Music Podcast, so you can reminisce over the rhythm, in which him, myself, and others will listen to albums or music that either Vaughn brings up or that he'll ask us to bring up, and we'll have a discussion of whether or not we like it or not. Now, of course, we're all different on the musical scale, but that's what makes the podcast interesting, because difference in taste lead to great conversations, and that's what the Rhythmist Music Podcast is all about. And finally, he actually has another show, which is really more of a pop-up show, in which Vaughn makes beats and sells beats like this. And any more than that, I'll have to pay him for actually using that beat. But yes, Vaughn actually does make beats, and at the same time he does sell them. But the whole point of Funkin' Around is to show the process from beginning to end, because Vaughn is definitely about that musical life, and he definitely wants to show it. And if you like music, if you like beats, or just like the musical journey, or just looking to buy beats to do your own tracks on, then definitely check out Big BZA on Facebook and Funkin' Around and all of his other podcasts. Definitely give a like, share, and subscribe. Definitely from there. Now, with that being said, guys, like I said before, I want to thank everybody who was watching to this tonight. And if you're watching this in the playback, please comment as if it's live. I definitely want to know what you guys think. And like I say, if you are, like I said, COVID-19 is real. Definitely wear a mask. Definitely do social distancing. Definitely try to avoid large crowds if you can, because the only way these numbers are going to go down besides vaccines is to actually look out for each other and try to protect ourselves as best we can. And also for all those definitely in the Houston area and area that was affected by the winter storm, hopefully you guys will stay safe, stay dry, stay warm, because right now Mother Nature does not know what it wants to do, because last time I checked, it is right back up to 70-something, 80-something in Texas. And Texas weather is similar to Tennessee weather. If you don't like it, just wait for a while. It'll definitely change. Aside from that, thank you doctors, nurses, doctors, environmental people that work in hospitals, because you guys are the real MVPs for everything that you've done. So definitely thank you for that. And if you do happen to run into one, tell them thank you for your service. It's the least you can do. And also, you essential people. I hate saying essential workers. It sounds so corporate. Essential people, because we need people to definitely get things done. I'm talking about those that work in gas stations, grocery stores, those that are truck drivers, those that work in warehouses like Amazon, and those that work in logistics like United States Postal Service, UPS, DHL, FedEx, and those other areas. Because a lot of us are able to work from home, and that's great, but a lot of us actually didn't have that luxury. So we definitely want to thank and respect those that really make sure that they stay protected while keeping the lights on for the rest of us. The last thing I'll say about how the fact we got here, guys, is all about staying informed. We basically have a purpose here of that we're not trying to change minds. We're not trying to persuade you. We're not trying to bring you to our way of thinking. We're just doing what the television stations of old used to do, which is just inform you with facts and allow you to make up your own mind and discuss it with others to actually form a conundrum. Because we can make a lot better decisions when we're informed. Uninformed individuals got us Trump and almost 4 years of hell. Hopefully, an informed group can come to a consensus and get our first black woman, Madam Vice President. So, with that being said, guys, hope you guys have a good night. Stay safe, stay dry, look out for each other, and as long as we do that, we gonna all get through it, and we gonna be all right. Not to quote Kendrick Lamar, but that's a wonderful topic. That's a wonderful way to end the podcast. Peace.